Since 1878, we've forged talents, industrialized skills, and nurtured minds. We all face challenges, but it is how we come together to overcome them that counts. We work with educators, employers, and governments in over 100 countries to get people into a job, progress in the job, and onto the next job. We are apprenticeships, T-levels, technicals, and traineeships. We are engineering, health and care, and construction. We are aspiration, opportunity, and ambition. We are city and guilds. No one is better qualified.
Blackbird singing in the dead of night.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Stepping Stones to Apprenticeships session with Bryony Kingsland, Funding and Policy Officer, Mandy Slaney, our Lead Industry Manager, and myself, Sam Edgerton, the Commercial Business Lead.
Thanks, Sam. Right, good. It's actually good afternoon, everybody, isn't it? So good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us. We decided to do this session because we're very aware, obviously, that with the pandemic, it's had an effect on the number of apprenticeship vacancies available for apprentices. So we wanted to look at, what other routes are there to enable young people and more mature people to step into an apprenticeship. What other courses and programs could they do in preparation for an apprenticeship, and what else is out there that they could do if they were waiting for the right apprenticeship vacancy to come up. So we've looked at those programs that we think could support someone to gain more skills so that they would be more successful at an apprenticeship interview, and that may actually keep them occupied learning new skills or new knowledge in preparation for hopefully when the economy is beginning to recover after the pandemic and there are more apprenticeship vacancies available. So first of all, we're going to look at some of the policy developments and the key financial developments over the last 6 months or so. So you can see what is actually available, as well as apprenticeships, and also some of the changes and incentives that have been put in place. We'll skip through these quickly because hopefully most people know about these, but we will have a good look at them so that you're aware, just for anybody who might have missed the news. So we can move to the next slide, please, Sam. Thanks. And the one after that. So, okay, so the spending review last November, there were quite a few announcements related to skills, and obviously the government is very keen to support everybody that's been affected by the pandemic in terms of their career or their career options, and also support providers and everybody else to obviously help them. So the first thing that was introduced was the new hire employer incentive, which had been in place, but it was extended until March. That's actually been extended again, and I'll look at that in the next slide. The other thing that the government announced, and you'll all know if you've seen the recent news, is that they wanted to look at making apprenticeships more portable. So they wanted to look at making them easier to access, making them more flexible. So there's currently a consultation out on portable apprenticeships. And if you put that into your browser, it'll bring up the consultation page so you can respond to that. But they're looking at portable apprenticeships for those sectors where actually it's more likely that workers are going to be on short-term contracts or working in a contractual arrangement rather than being in a permanent job. So it's much more difficult if their short-term contracts don't meet the duration of apprenticeship to be able to move between employers but still carry their apprenticeship with them. And as part of that, they're also looking at the current apprenticeship training organisation, the ATA model, and how that will work in conjunction with this. So that's also linked to the reforms in the FE White Paper. And the other thing that the Chancellor announced was the 375 million National Skills Fund. And there are a variety of strands of work going on underneath that could support someone to gain new skills, to either step them into an apprenticeship later on or step them into a career where they could potentially do an apprenticeship later, or actually just help them get into a new role. And then there's Restart, which is the new DWP programme to support people that have been unemployed for more than 12 months. It's not in place yet. The commercial process for that is now complete. I believe that the providers that have won the contract regions know who they are. And there's, I think the plan is for Restart to start later on this year in June, July. And that will be a support package. And it's going to be a sort of surrounding package for the individual that will offer them support with skills, employability. It could offer them support for housing, for debt, also any support any sort of support that they need, including mental health, Restart will give them, but skills are definitely in there. And the government, I think, and DWP have made it very clear that they see skills as quite a large part of Restart. So that's something that providers should be aware of, because it means that referrals from Restart providers and from Job Centre Plus are probably going to start increasing, looking for employability and skill support as part of Restart later on this year. So definitely something to keep an eye on. If we look at the next slide then, Sam, that would be great, thanks. And then there was the spring budget, where the apprenticeship new hire employer incentive, the 16 to 24 and 25 incentive, was increased and extended until September this year. And furlough is extended till September this year as well. Although later on in the year, they are tapering the amount that they're contributing, because they want employers to contribute more. So that's the furlough. And traineeships, another £126 million worth of money was added to traineeships. Now, this I think is a really important potential stepping stone. So we'll talk more about this later, and Mandy's going to talk to you about our traineeship offer. And the reality is what the government want with traineeships is they want to triple the participation. They've included an employer incentive there, and they've extended that employer incentive until July 2022. So there's £1,000 per trainee until July 2022 as part of the traineeships support package. So that's another one to look at as well, because traineeships can be a really great stepping stone for a 19 to 24-year-old into an apprenticeship, potentially at a later date, giving them, I suppose, with traineeships that one step more than maybe someone who hasn't done a traineeship in terms of their knowledge from employability, their maths and English skills, their digital skills. And you can also add into a traineeship a vocational award or unit or module, which could just give them enough knowledge of the sector or occupation they're going to step into to give them advantage at an apprenticeship interview over potential other applicants. So that's why traineeships, I think, are really great as stepping stones. And then also there's, again, they've been talking about the pump priming for the employer-led portable apprenticeships, and that's the skills accelerator that was advertised last week, and the portable apprenticeship consultation. So that's another one to watch, because we're going to see more developments of that over the year, and they're looking for pilots at the moment to try those out. And the next slide, please, Sam. So I just wanted to look at the apprenticeship incentives in a little bit more detail. So from 1st of April until end of September this year, the current scheme ended on the 31st of March, and the new scheme came in on the 1st of April. And the new scheme has increased the amount to a flat rate of £3,000 per apprenticeship hire from 1st of April, regardless of the apprentice's age. So they don't need to be 16 to 24, as in previously, because that actually dropped the amount to £1,500. There's a new flat rate of £3,000 per new hire apprentice from 1st of April until the end of September. And that is in addition to the £1,000 grant that was originally given and brought in when the apprenticeship reforms came in 2017 for 16 to 18 apprentices. So if you are taking on as an employer, or you're working with employers who are taking on apprentices from the 1st of April, if they're taking on 16 to 18 apprentices, they can get £4,000 per start. They claim it through the apprenticeship service. It's, as you can see there, it's paid in 2 equal instalments, one at 90 days and then the other one at a year, 365 days. And employers can start claiming that from June 2021, but they do have to be on the apprenticeship service to claim it. So supporting any of the employers you're working on, if you're a provider, to get access to the apprenticeship service, so they can get hold of that £4,000 new apprenticeship hire incentive would be a good thing to do. And the cut-off payments for the current scheme, that's actually the one that ended in March, have now been extended till May. That was previously the end of April. So payments, so people who, or employers that started new apprentices before the 1st of April can still claim for those new hires at the original rate of £2,000 for 16 to 24-year-old and £1,500 for 25-year-old up until the end of May now. So that's been extended as well. News slide, please, Sam. So the other thing that's happened is the FE white paper. So this was published in January, and there's a lot of things happening with this. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, because we've actually already done a webinar which is available on the City and Guilds website, and you can find up a lot more about the FE white paper. But there's some aspects of the FE white paper which can actually help someone step into an apprenticeship at a later date if they're struggling to find a relevant vacancy at the moment. So one of those is actually the fully funded level 3 qualifications for adults who don't currently have a full level 3. Obviously, part of the FE White Paper was the improving the quality and flexibility of apprenticeships, which is that portability, and also the incentives, and also looking at potential for front-loaded apprenticeships to make the whole apprenticeship sector more flexible. We've not got any more detail on the front loading of apprenticeships. I know that there are concerns out there about that because, frankly, you know, there used to be programme-led apprenticeships and no one wants to see the repeat of those. So I think what will happen is that if the government does look more into the front-loaded apprenticeships, and we get to hear more about that, that there will have to be a job in place for the apprentice. And you would front-load potentially the off-the-job in the early days of the apprenticeship, and then they would enjoy the join the employer once they'd been through quite a proportion of, or potentially the whole of their off-the-job training. But I think the government would ensure that there was a job in place. And then you can see also expanding the traineeships. And then there's the new lifetime loan offer, which is due to come in from 2025, but there'll be a consultation on that later on this year. And also alongside all of this, improved career support, and also the government is going to be looking at the funding and accountability framework for providers. And again, there's going to be a consultation on that in May. So if you're a provider, do watch out for that, because I think that's going to be an important consultation. And the link for the paper is just there at the bottom. New slide, please, Sam. So we'll look at the new adult level 3 offer, if you can move it on, Sam. The National Skills Fund and the adult level 3 offer. Now, obviously, if you're an apprenticeship provider and you don't have access to adult education funding, you are not able to deliver this. But if you do work in partnership with other providers in the area, and you are a major apprenticeship provider, there's no reason why arrangements and referring people to the adult level 3 offer as an interim arrangement to enable them to gain some skills and then maybe step into an apprenticeship later at a higher level than they anticipated shouldn't be an option. So from the 1st of April, any adult aged 24 and over who does not already have a full level 3 can get access to a fully funded level 3 qualification. It is from a prescribed list though, so the government have basically decided which qualifications are relevant for this offer, and the list is prescribed. You can get access to that on the links on the right hand side of these slides, and they will be shared after the AAC, so you'll be able to access them then. Providers also get an uplift in funding to support the extra resources needed to deliver this offer. So I'll talk more about that uplift in a moment. I think the great thing about the level 3 offer is that there are quite a few people out there. I mean, one of the conversations we've already had with the ESFA is that in actual fact, they do not consider an apprenticeship, an advanced apprenticeship, to be a level 3 qualification. So it's entirely possible that someone who's already taken an advanced apprenticeship could access also an adult level 3 fully funded qualification, because an apprenticeship at level 3, or they don't call it level 3, they call it advanced, an apprenticeship is not considered to be a full level 3 qualification, which I think is weird, and that might change in the future, but at the moment that is the case. So someone who's taken an apprenticeship but is struggling to find a job in that sector can potentially maybe change sectors by taking a level 3 diploma or certificate in a different sector to head them into a different career if actually they're struggling to gain employment in their current sector or occupation. The other thing is there are lots of people out there with small level 3 qualifications, and a full level 3 qualification is a diploma or certificate of 360 guided learning hours or more, 2 A levels or 4 AS levels, or a full technical qualification. So if someone's got a small award at level 3, for example, or a very small qualification at level 3, they would still potentially be eligible for the level 3 fully funded adult offer. We're also having conversations, or we've asked at ESFA, there are some smaller qualifications in this prescribed list. Some of them are small awards. I looked at one the other day that was only 80 guided learning hours. So would it be feasible, and we're waiting for clarification on this from the ESFA, but would it be feasible for someone to potentially take 2 or 3 small qualifications under this level 3 adult offer until they reach what would be perceived to be a full level 3 qualification, instead of just taking one? So we're waiting on more news on that, and I'm hoping that at some point the ESFA is going to clarify that and we'll hear more about it. And finally, providers can ask and employers can ask for more qualifications to be added to this offer. They have to meet the eligibility criteria, which is fairly extensive and a little bit restrictive, unfortunately. But a mayoral combined authority or an awarding organisation such as ourselves can request further qualifications to be added to this offer if they meet that eligibility criteria. And City and Guilds, we've already actually appealed 44 qualifications. We were due to hear in mid-March, but ESFA hasn't yet come back to any of the awarding bodies that appealed qualifications to be added to the offer. We are still waiting for that, even though it started on the 1st of April. So hopefully we will hear soon, and we'll see how many of those 44 qualifications we appealed have been added in to make it this offer more flexible for providers. So that's the level 3 adult offer, potential for a young person or an adult to gain more skills in a certain sector, enabling to step into maybe a higher level of apprenticeship, as long as obviously the prior learning doesn't affect the duration of the apprenticeship so much that they then become ineligible. But certainly something to talk to young people about if they're really struggling to get access, or to an adult about if they're struggling to get access to an apprenticeship, because the job roles or vacancies are just not there at the moment when we've got this, current economic situation. Next slide, please, Sam. So these are the priority sectors for the new adult level 3 offer. You can see there are some missing. So hospitality and catering is not there, retail is not there, and creative is not there. Now, mayoral combined authorities can actually request any qualification to be added to this offer if, for example, they have proof that the economic shock of the pandemic has affected that sector in their specific region and they actually have vacancies. So even though that a particular sector might not be there for you, for example, hospitality and catering, but your MCA is seeing a rise in vacancies in that area and there just aren't not enough young people or adults applying for those roles, then actually the MCA could request the ESFA add a qualification in hospitality and catering, even though it's not there in the priority sectors. The MCA could request that the ESFA add a qualification. So if you are based in a mayoral combined authority area and you have adult education budget, and one of the sectors you want to deliver in because you're getting a lot of requests from employers, because you have to be able to prove that the employers need this, you can request that your mayoral combined authority asks for this to be added to the list that's already there. So that's the priority sectors. Next slide, please, Sam. And these are a couple of worked examples of the funding rate, because there is the extra funding rate. Now, the ESFA didn't put anything in the funding rules, unfortunately, about the sort of category code 45 and category code 46. They just stated there would be an uplift. So after a lot of investigation, what I've worked out is that actually if the category code is 45 for a qualification, it means the eligible qualification has a minimum of 360 guided learning hours, and that gets you the £600 uplift. If it's category code 46, it means it's a qualification with less than 360 guided learning hours, so that gets you the £150 uplift. In addition to the weighted funding rate. So you can see a couple of examples there. The level 3 City and Guilds level 3 in engineering is a weighted funding rate of 2583. With the £600 uplift, you would get 3183. Plus, and I haven't done an example of this, but we were asked several times about whether the uplift would receive any other uplifts attached to it. So if the uplift is applicable, you also get area cost uplift and disadvantage uplift added to that £600 and the 2583. So it would actually be slightly more than 3183, dependent on the area cost uplift and the disadvantage uplift that was applicable in your specific area. And the other example is for a qualification that's less than 360 guided learning hours, and you can see the extra 150 plus your area cost uplift and disadvantage uplift if they're applicable. So that's a couple of worked examples and an explanation for those category code 46 and category code 45, because I know we've had quite a few queries about that, and providers have struggled to understand exactly what those category codes are for. So hopefully that helps on that front. So next slide, please, Sam. So the next bit is traineeship. So if we go to the next slide. Okay, so these are the traineeships policy developments and incentives. The Chancellor announced the additional 126 million extra funding for the 16 to 24 traineeships to triple the numbers. Now, ESFA procurement for 1924 is 83 contracts were awarded, and they've all been given traineeship funding. And also Colleges who actually receive adult education budget will have been given an amount in their adult education budget for traineeships, and are able to request that a part of their 16 to 18 delivery is also dedicated to traineeships. So if you want to know more about that, and also the employer incentive form, you can use that link at the bottom. So those are some of the developments and traineeship incentives. I think the key thing here is to recognise is that traineeships are that great stepping stone. You can add a vocational module or award or small certificate, because the traineeship length has been extended, and there's been changes to the actual way traineeships are the traineeship framework works. So instead of just being up to 6 months, a traineeship can now be a full year. So if, for example, you wanted to add in City and Guilds business administration level 2 qualification, that actually fits into a year's delivery. That could easily move someone onto a level 3 apprenticeship. Now, we know at the moment there is no level 2 business administration apprenticeship, although there's been news this week that it might actually now be on the cards. But in the interim, the traineeship in business admin, which for a year could almost do exactly the same thing, but with less obviously time in the employer, because you do anything from sort of 2 months to 3 weeks work placement, plus the full qualification, and then they would be ready to step into a level 3 apprenticeship in business admin. So those are the changes in traineeship policy. Next slide, Sam. I think I'm actually about to pass over to Mandy on this. Mandy, do you want to pick up here, or do you want me to continue on?
You just cover the funding, Bryony.
I'll cover the funding and then I'll pass over to you. So these next 2 slides are about the funding. So 19 to 24 is a separate element of the ESFA funded AEB. It's delivered to 19 to 24. As a provider, you have to apply to the ESFA by a business case application. So if you go to the traineeships page on the esfa.gov website, there is a pro forma there for the business case application to convert some of your 1920, some of your AEB to traineeship funding. So AEB training funding, it's not devolved to combined authorities. So traineeships are actually still a national programme. So if you're in a combined authority area, it's still the ESFA you need to go to if you want to access 19 to 24 traineeship funding from your AEB. 16 to 18, obviously you have to request that some of your 16 to 18 funding is vired off as traineeship funds. But if you do that, and you do actually set aside some of your 16 to 18 funding as traineeships, you can't swap it backwards and forwards. In the same way, you cannot via funds from your ESFA adult education budget traineeship funds back into your AEB funding. Once you've decided that some of your adult education budget is going to be for traineeships, that's what you have to deliver for it. You can't swap it backwards and forwards. So you can't use it for any other programme. And there's also a bursary fund for students that are 16 to 19 for traineeships. And we know that there are some young people out there that do struggle with the cost of travel to their work placement, and also potentially with clothing. So the bursary fund can help them with that. And you can also get discretionary bursaries for help with under 19 learners with the cost of transport, meals, books and equipment, etc. So there's that first bursary for defined vulnerable groups, and also the discretionary bursary for under 19 learners to support them to access to a traineeship. And the next slide, please, Sam, because I think the next slide is the actual funding. So what's changed? So you can see here the eligibility, it's still 16 to 24 and 25 if the young person has an education, health and care plan because they've been in care. Now the person can be qualified up to level 3. Now previously, traineeships were only for people who are young people who are level 2 and below. But what the government has now said is that they know that there are quite a few people out there that have a level 3, but their level 3 is not getting them into the sector or occupation they anticipated. So actually you could put them through a traineeship and give them new experience in a new occupation or a new sector if they've already got another level 3, and you can put them through that traineeship and give them new skills and experience to hopefully get them into work. So they've opened up the programme to more 19 to 24-year-olds. That's the eligibility. They've also extended the duration from a maximum of 6 months up to a maximum of a year. So the minimum duration for a traineeship is 6 weeks. The maximum is 1 year. And as now, the referrals are built on good, strong working partnerships with Job Centre Plus, so worth having a conversation with the Job Centre Plus, and potentially also any restart providers that you might be aware of in your region as well, because traineeships could support restart providers potentially as well with the skills side of the restart programme. They work very, very well, or traineeships work very well for people who only need a fairly small intervention. They're not a program, I don't think, realistically, that are geared to people who are very, very far away from the employment market. They need extra support. A traineeship is a short, sharp intervention between sort of, 3 months and a year to get someone ready for a new occupation, a new sector, or to step into a higher level apprenticeship. So it is that really good stepping stone. Next slide, please, Sam. Right, so these are the some of the core content. So I'm going to pass this over to Mandy to pick up. Because she's now she's our expert in content and what's available to actually help you deliver an apprenticeship.
Thank you, Bryony. Please chip in, Bryony, if I miss anything or if there's anything.
I will do.
Thank you. So let's look at what is a traineeship. So the core content, so that's really around employability, skills, work preparation, and really preparing that learner to actually go into work. What we find about the ideal sort of learner for a traineeship would be ones with little or no work experience. So they really need to develop them skills that employers are asking for to enable them to progress into an apprenticeship or employment, or it could be further education. Also, the other part of that is there's English, maths, and more recently the digital skills. So that has now been added to the traineeships as a requirement. And I think that's definitely come sort of on the back of employers saying we need learners to come through with these digital skills. Then there's also the flexible content, and this is around the actual sector vocational learning. So if you've got a learner that, they know exactly where they want to go, you've got work placement lined up, then you can look at bite-sized chunks or qualifications in whichever sector areas. Also, as Bryony mentioned earlier, there's an increase actually in the core funding as well now. So, 15,000, that'd be nice, £1,500, which has been increased. And also the other side of that is the employer incentive. So £1,000 per trainee. So next slide, Sam, please. So I think this is really positive, and I think we need to sort of hook on to this, is actually the results of the traineeships. And as you can see, 62% of trainees progress to a positive destination within 6 months. But actually, more importantly, 75% of them are still in their destinations after a year. So I think, as Brian sort of mentioned earlier, given the current circumstances, a traineeship is ideal as that stepping stone programme. Get them ready, get them prepared for an apprenticeship in the future.
I think it's also a really good taster as well, isn't it? Because if someone's if they know that their current sector is not in a period of expansion, or actually it's a shrinking sector because of automation or because of the pandemic, and they're not really 100% sure of the sector they want to go into, they could go into an apprenticeship. But we know that some people do start an apprenticeship and a few months later they do drop out because they realise it's really not for them. Traineeships give people that taster as well. So you could put someone through a short traineeship with a short module or an award or a unit of a vocational qualification that's relevant to the sector they're interested in, put them through a traineeship for 3 or 4 months, give them a taste of a work placement if there's an employer that's keen, and also give them a taste of the vocational skills needed in that particular sector. And at least then you'll be more sure that if they do step into the apprenticeship, having had that taster, they'll be more ready and more likely to finish the apprenticeship because they've experienced the sector already and it's something they are interested in and something they would be interested to continue working in. So they also act as a good taster for someone who's not 100% sure of the apprenticeship area they might want to move into. So from that point of view, if your young person is dithering a little bit, maybe a traineeship is a good start before they step into the apprenticeship later.
Yeah, really good point that, Bryony. On the back of sort of traineeships and the growth, and we are looking at like 30,000 traineeships. So several providers sort of said, well, can you show us what that might look like? What does a traineeship program look like? So what we've done is we've actually developed over 11 actual occupational sector delivery plans, just to give you ideas of what that might look like. And what you could put the learners on. So I'm just really going to briefly touch on the one we put together for business skills today. So Sam, next slide, please. Those are, as you can see, they're the core components. So you've got your work preparation, employability skills. Again, you can tailor that to the actual sector as well, because we know in certain sectors, you know, communication will be key for, you know, that's, you know, if they're working with customers, and, you know, you really need to enhance some skills. But also the employability skills is so vast. There's, you know, there's sector specific, or there's actually, you know, them learners actually working with others and just developing their employability skills. Also the maths and English, you could have ones that just need a top up, or, you know, bite size sizes of maths and English. And also the digital, you know, you could actually again tailor that to the actual employers. You know, what types of things would that employee be looking for? Would it be like putting together some sort of flyer? You know, the learners could get involved in that and actually start developing the digital skills. And then we move on to the vocational tasters. So I've just put a few examples of different qualifications that we do. But as Bryony said, particularly for business, you know, we've got a huge gap in the business admin level 2. So what we, you know, the providers came to us and employers saying, what can we put together as a stepping stone programme? So what we've done is put, you know, level 2, whether it's small or bigger qualifications, larger, that would help that learner either progress into an apprenticeship or just into employment. The next slide, Sam, please. So this is just another example. So again, what we did was we put a level 1 unit in there. We put some different size qualifications in, you know, different sizes of the employability, really just because, as Bryony mentioned before, it's so flexible now. You can really tailor this to individual learners. So some that need a shorter intervention, and then build a, you know, a big, much bigger, larger program for ones that need that more, you know, more skills development, or just actually that hand holding or vocational development.
I think it's really important to say here that when we worked, when we initially realised that there wasn't going to be a level 2 business admin apprenticeship, and we'd spoken to so many employers and so many providers, hadn't we, Mandy, about the big gap that was going to leave, and the fact that so many employers see the level 2 as the entry point to employment, and for them taking on a level 2 learner means they want them to do a level 2 qualification and then potentially step up to a level 2 later on. But actually, and many of them want them to come in already with level 2 skills, or at least the knowledge that they will be ready for level 2. And there are many young people who leave school who are not ready to step onto that level 3 business admin apprenticeship. It's just not going to be successful for them. So we had lots of forums with both employers and providers about this to discuss with them what we could do as an awarding organisation that might fill that gap with the loss of the level 2 business admin framework last year. And it was the traineeship in the end that both the employers and the providers said that actually this could be something that actually helps us fill that gap and creates a stepping stone to that level 3 business admin. And this is what we came up with. So we've put in place a variety of different frameworks. And once we'd done that for one sector, we ended up doing it for a variety of other sectors, because other employers and other providers saw the business admin framework and said, oh, can you produce a traineeship framework for our sector for this? So we've got them for engineering, we've got them for construction. Each of them quite flexible with a variety of different qualifications that you can add in, or certificates or awards that you can add in for the vocational side. And Mandy's going to show you a little bit more about some of the qualifications that could be added to a traineeship business admin wise on the next few slides.
Thanks, Bryony. So Bryony put this together, and it's always useful just to actually, you know, providers are sort of saying, well, that's fine, but, you know, how does the funding work? So on every single example that we've produced for each of the sector areas, Bryony's actually put together, you know, what does that mean for me? So this is purely an example, and you'd have to look at the final qualifications that you'd actually built into that programme. But this gives you a taster of sort of, you know, what does that program mean to me? You know, how much is it? How much funding are we going to get? How is it going to work? And also the differences between the 19 plus and the 16 to 19, you know, which are obviously crucial differences there. So we hope that, you know, will certainly help. Next
so the
slide.
16 to 19 funding, that's slightly different. The 19 plus funding, you've got the core funding plus anything that you might do for English or maths if you were to deliver both functional skills, plus obviously digital if it was going to be in there. And then we've got an example 2 level certificate in principles of business admin. Now you get extra funding in the traineeship for that. So you get the core funding for the sort of employability aspect of the programme, plus you get your English and maths. So that's the core content is the work preparation and the work placement, and the employer gets £1,000, and that's not taken out out of the 1,500, that core content funding goes entirely to the provider for the work prep and placement. And then anything else that you might add in is added on top of that. So your full program funding or potential program funding for a 19 plus trainee, if they were doing that level 2 certificate in principles of business admin, would be 3,672. But 16 to 19 funding comes out of the programs of study funding. So a lot would depend on the size of the program you put together for that young person in terms of the hours. And you can see here that according to the, this is in the table on the right hand side of the slide, according to how many hours will show you how much funding you get for that traineeship, depending on how many hours the program contained once you'd finished putting it together with the trainee and the employer.
Thanks, Bryony. And then this is really just giving you an example of sort of the qualifications that we put together, just to give you a choice really of which ones might be useful, but also the sizes, because that's one of the key questions we got asked a lot is, well, we only want short ones, we want longer, and also the funding that was attached to that. So on all of the different example occupational delivery programs, you know, we put together a variety of qualifications that might be suitable. And Bryony keeps them lists up to date. So Bryony has a funding page on our website, which I know, you know, not just you as providers and employers really value, but we do as well, because it's really useful just to see at a glance actually what is available, what's funded. So yeah, brilliant. So next slide, Sam. I think that's, so really this is just a traineeship web page. We've got a dedicated web page, and that has all the sector examples in there. And as Bryony said, we are actually adding to that list all the time. We got asked for a rail one more recently. And also what we will be doing is, Bryony mentioned earlier on about the new Restart programme. We will be doing something very similar in that space, which will look, you know, we'll give you examples of different programmes and the funding. So please, you know, keep an eye out, watch your space. We will be doing webinars on that, but it will follow a very similar format. And that's it. I'll hand over to Bryony.
Thanks. We're down to sort of questions and answers now. So have we got any questions in the in the chat and question side of things, Sam, at all?
Nothing's come through as yet, but I think Tom's going to bring the Slido up, which will have the questions on. No, it doesn't look like no, it doesn't look like there's any questions yet. It must have been very thorough, Bryony and Mandy.
I don't know about that. I think one of the things that is also worth mentioning, and we've talked about traineeships, we've talked a little bit about Restart, we've talked about the level 3 adult offer, but also, I mean, adult education budget. You know, that we're very aware, obviously, that the eligibility for adult education budget can be a little bit restrictive, and eligibility criteria for people, for young people and for adults can also restrict them from what they can access. But the other thing to be aware of, and not many people are aware of this, is it's actually feasible to deliver some adult education budget delivery alongside an apprenticeship to expand on the apprenticeship content. And I know there's been discussions earlier on in the week during the AAC about the fact that some apprenticeships are very restrictive in content. They're very geared towards a particular occupation rather than a sector. And we've had some providers, you know, and some employers frustrated by this to a certain extent. But just to be aware that if your young person is eligible and for adult education budget, and there's actually a qualification or a unit or a module or an award which would not duplicate or replicate anything within the apprenticeship content delivery, but actually complements the apprenticeship by adding extra skills to that young person, you can deliver that alongside the apprenticeship. Now, obviously, your apprentice has got to be willing, because it means they're going to be doing extra work over and above their apprenticeship. And we know some apprenticeships are actually already quite demanding. But say, for example, they were doing, you know, a hair and beauty apprenticeship, and I'm not an expert on apprenticeship content. content, so I apologise for this. If it's just as an example, if they're doing a hair and beauty or a hair based apprenticeship, but actually the salon they were working in also did nails or manicures, or also did hair for weddings or makeup for weddings, you could, if the person was eligible, add in units or modules of awards or even certificates to that apprenticeship, which give that young person skills in manicure, or give them skills in bridal hair, or give them skills in bridal makeup alongside their level 3 hair apprenticeship, which would expand out their skills and obviously make them more employable at a selection of different salons. So there are, as long as the content of the adult education budget complements, it can't be directly conflicting. So for example, you couldn't do a hair apprenticeship at level 3 and then add in an engineering unit. That's just not going to work at all. But it's got to complement that particular apprenticeship. So that's another aspect of someone doing an apprenticeship to broaden their skills, make them more employable. But obviously it's got to be something that both the employer and the apprentice is willing to do, because it does mean extra work for the apprentice, and it can't interrupt their off-the-job training or anything else to do with the apprenticeship. It's got to be done outside of that time. So it'd have to be studied, probably evening class or something maybe they could do at weekends, or maybe something they could do during a holiday break or something. So that's another aspect that can support people to expand out their skills if they're currently taking an apprenticeship, but they're struggling, with other skills that they would like to access, and the apprenticeship isn't providing them. So that's another area. Anything else that we should be mentioning, do you think, at all, Mandy, in regards to our traineeship offer or traineeships or anything else of the offer?
No, I don't think so. As I say, I think we just value feedback as well from employers and providers if they feel that something's missing, or just to have a look really and just give us that feedback. And quite a few providers are delivering these now. I think we have seen an increase recently. And I think, Sam, you've seen it certainly from your side around, the take up is starting to pick up, momentum's starting to pick up. So, and I think it's really preparing future apprentices. I think that, we've got that gap at the moment where, many can't actually progress into an apprenticeship due to restrictions and, the situation really. So I think it's like a lot of providers are taking the opportunity to actually start working with, potential future apprentices. So, yeah.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions here. We've got one. Well, it's not really a question, it's a comment from Anisha that says the business admin level 3 apprenticeship has lots of elements that frighten off people, and looking at the range it covers, it feels too diverse and will not necessarily suit some employers. Well, we know that's very much the case, that sometimes the BA does cover areas that the employer doesn't feel are relevant. So yes, I mean, it could well be that a traineeship might fill that space, or it could well be that actually the level 3 adult offer might fill that space and provide something for the employer if the apprenticeship is not feasible. Now, obviously, we know that obviously that for those learners that already have a full level 3, it may well be that they need to take out a loan. But I've known of areas where actually the employer is prepared to potentially pay off that loan at the end of the qualification, if the learner does the full level 3 and completes it and achieves it, and it gives them the skills that the employer wants. The employer has then been happy to pay off that loan. So that's another option that could be there as well. And there's part 2 of the question. It says, can we have some middle ground? Unfortunately, I'm not 100% sure what that means. So can we have some middle ground? Did anyone know what that might mean? Anyone got any bright ideas? I'm sorry, Chris, I really don't know what you mean there by can we have some middle ground. It's obviously part 2 of another question, so if anyone wants to pop that up, we'll try and answer it, but I'm not 100% sure what that means at the moment. So I'm not sure whether it's middle ground that you want from City and Guilds or middle ground that you want from the government. I'm hoping it's middle ground that you want from the government in terms of apprenticeships and an offer. I think certainly in terms of eligibility, I think that there is a strong need with that adult level 3 offer, the one that started on the 1st of April, to make it, there are some people out there that have got a level 3, but actually the level 3 is not getting them employment in the sector that they wanted because the sector's shrinking or it's been affected by the pandemic. And actually, if they have got a level 3 that isn't getting them employment, my view is they should be allowed to take a second level 3 in a subject or priority area that is likely to lead to more employment, and that the government should be looking to flex that adult level 3 offer more to give more flexibility, because there are plenty of people out there at level 3 already that are going to need to retrain, if not now, then certainly in the next 5 years because of automation. So what happens to them? What can they access that's going to enable them to retrain and step into employment? And we know that, you know, adult education has dropped by from around about 4 million back in the sort of, you know, 2008, 2000, and right down to 1.75, under 1.75 million at the moment. And yet with automation and the fourth industrial revolution, actually adults will need to retrain and gain new skills to stay employed as much as young people. So now, sorry, that's part 2 of the question above us. There's a character limit, both questions from Chris. The BA level 2 has elements that frighten off people, and looking at the range it covers, it feels too diverse and not necessarily suits some employers. Can we have some middle ground? Right, it's linked to that UPS question. Well, yes, I mean, hopefully, Chris, the traineeships might provide that middle ground. And we've heard this week that IFE are potentially considering a level 2 standard. So I think that's something definitely to lobby for, and maybe to have more conversations with IFE about, in terms of what might be contained in that level 2 business administration. But yes, I mean, middle ground. Hopefully the level 3 adult offer might provide some level ground, certainly worth looking at. And if you only provide apprenticeships, worth talking and working in partnership with providers in your area that do have access to that funding, so that you can work together to provide a more comprehensive offer for your region. And as part of those changes I mentioned earlier on in the slides, the policy developments, the pilots for local skills improvement plans are all being advertised now for employer-based organisations to bid for, and those local skills improvement plan groups will include colleges and private providers, and should include private providers. So I think it's really important that private providers, if you're in an area that has one of those pilots, to get engaged, so you have your say is heard, as well as colleges and employers, as to what the employment needs in the local skills improvement plan should look like. You don't want to be left out of that process. It's very important to hear what's going on and have some engagement with it, because that could potentially affect that, you know, that need for some middle ground that Chris has flagged there. How are we on timing? Do we know?
Yeah, we're just on the final minute. So if there's any final reflections before we wrap up the session, that would be great.
I think just final questions is obviously, we know that, you know, there is a shortage of apprenticeship vacancies at the moment, so do consider the other options that your learners may be able to access to give them that advantage over potential other applicants for apprenticeship vacancies. So consider the traineeships, consider the adult level 3. It may well be that steps someone into an advanced apprenticeship or even a level 4 apprenticeship. So it's just consider all the options, and if you only deliver apprenticeships, consider working in partnership with other providers in your area that have access to that funding to broaden your offer, because that learner is going to come back to you at a later date to access apprenticeship vacancies. So no reason why they shouldn't access other courses now to give them that advantage later on. Anything else you want to say, Mandy?
No, that's covered everything there, Bryony.
Great. Thank you very much, Mandy, and thanks, Bryony.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. I hope that was useful.